But on that note, it is my privilege to introduce Father José Patrício to you, whose dedication to canon law and his tireless efforts in combating the sexual abuse of minors have made a profound impact on both the church and society. Father José is a priest from the Diocese of Lamego in Portugal. His academic journey led him to pursue a master's degree in canon law at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. Father José has devoted his studies and research since 2003 to the critical area of preventing and addressing cases of sexual abuse of minors. His commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members of our society has been unwavering, and he has become a trusted resource for individuals and ecclesiastical, tough word, institutions seeking legal counsel and guidance in navigating these complex matters. Currently serving as the rector of the Pontifical Portuguese College in Rome, Father José oversees the spiritual and educational formation of future priests. In this role, he instills in them a strong sense of ethics and a deep understanding of the importance of safeguarding the dignity and well-being of all individuals, particularly the most vulnerable among us. Please join me in welcoming Father José to talk about the accountability to organisation members.
Good morning. I will start as St. John Paul II, asking forgiveness for my English, which is not my native language, so I ask for your patience and corrections if it's needed. I would like to begin thanking the kind invitation to share with you in this occasion some thoughts about accountability to organization members. I would like to thank especially Father Hans Zollner for the invitation and to share my gratitude to all the organizers and especially their patience and the kind presentation of Simon this morning. But above all, I would like to begin showing each one of you my deepest appreciation for your precious work all around the world, and the main idea that underlies everything I will share on the next few minutes is a simple one. Although we don't live in a perfect world, your efforts really make the difference. That is especially true when we reflect upon accountability in an organization like the Catholic Church. But with all the difficulties and many times some frustration, your efforts for a safer church are really, really important. I would like to start with a small story that happened to a parish priest many, many years in Portugal. A couple, a man and a woman, they were all above the 70s, almost 80 years old, went to the parish priest and told him, we would like to marry. The parish priest was a little bit surprised by the age of the newly spoused and said to them, okay, very well, let's proceed with the formal part of the wedding. So he asked the lady to step out of the room and asked the man, but fellow mine, please tell me, are you going to marry for love or for interest? And the man thought a few moments and said to him and answered him, Father, it must be love, because I have no interest in her. The same thing happens with accountability. We have in the Catholic Church many people, many of them with high responsibilities in the church, that love the church, that truthfully love the church, love the people of God, but have no interest in accountability. And that's a mentality we need to change. And with your efforts, we will change. Accountability serves as a crucial pillar within organizations, establishing a culture of responsibility, transparency, and ethical behavior. In today's complex and interconnected environment, also in the religious organizations, Accountability plays a pivotal role in promoting trust and credibility. What I am about to share as the main objective, not to give answers, but to paint a framework of questions that you can later discuss and to get deeper into. We will begin by the definition of concepts. What are we talking about when we speak about accountability for organization members, which is the title of my presentation? What does accountability mean? As Director Don Landergan yesterday said, and as our own experience reflects, it is not easy to define accountability. As we know, accountability comes from the Latin computare, to count. To be accountable is to be able to count, to proceed to produce an account, or to give an account of what one has done or has failed to do. As Father Hans Solner yesterday also said in his initial welcome remarks, and you already can see why he invited me, because he needed a heavy priest to speak about accountability. As he yesterday said, the term accountability has no easy translation in some languages. I was particularly offended when he said that in Portuguese there is no specific translation of this concept. But he also spoke about Italian and Spanish languages. And that is true. But that also reflects a novelty. This is a concept that didn't appear in dictionaries or encyclopedias until the beginning of the 80s. It's a rather new concept, and we all know that, especially in the Catholic Church, everything takes time, measured not in years or decades, but in centuries. We are in Rome. Rome is known as to be the eternal city. You know why? Because everything takes an eternity. You go to the traffic, you go to the post office, you go to everywhere, and it takes an eternity. So in terms of accountability, it's the same thing. And I'm going to try to show you, or at least to illustrate, small changes come, and these small changes are the opening for other more large and significant changes that are about to come. But I'm confident we can use the term accountability as the obligation of individuals and organizations to take ownership of their actions, decisions, and outcomes. It encompasses various dimensions, including transparency, answerability, responsibility, and consequences. So, accountability is this. So, what do I mean about organization members, the second part of the title of my presentation? What kind of organization are we talking about? We are talking about the Catholic Church and its constellation of organizations that live inside the Catholic Church. One belongs to the Catholic Church not by invitation or by application, or even by its own merits, but you enter the Catholic Church by a sacrament, the baptism. By baptism, we become Christian faithful, who, and I quote, are those who have been constituted as the people of God. For this reason, made sharers in their own way in Christ's priestly, prophetic, and royal function. They are called to exercise the mission which God has entrusted to the Church to fulfill in the world in accord with the condition proper to each. This is Second Vatican Council, but as is translated in the Code of Canon Law in the Canon 204. But when you speak about the Catholic Church, we don't speak only about the ecclesia, the gathering or the assembly of all those baptized. We also speak about the institution, about the organization on its visible aspects. This, of course, is not a class of ecclesiology, and if someone went for a class of ecclesiology can leave. So I assume everyone already has a deep background about the Catholic Church and its structure. Point number 2, accountability in the Catholic Church. So, what kind of accountability is possible on the Catholic Church as an organization and to its members? From now on, and that's a problem of my formation, I will center my attention on the juridical dimension of accountability. And the first thing I would like to point at is that accountability is a need, is an obligation, is a desire that the Christian faithful are entitled to. The Christian faithful, and I quote, are free to make known to the pastors of the church their needs, especially spiritual ones, and their desires. Canon 212, paragraph 2 of the Code of Canon Law. And on the next paragraph of the same canon, according, and I quote, according to the knowledge, competence, and prestige which they possess, they have the right, and even at times the duty, to manifest to the sacred pastors their opinion on matters which pertain to the good of the Church, and to make their opinion known to the rest of the Christian faithful, without prejudice to the integrity of faith and morals, with reverence to other pastors, and attentive to common advantage and the dignity of persons. And the dignity of persons. Accountability may not be a fully developed obligation from the part of church officials, but, in my humble opinion, is a fully developed right from all baptized. As also Father Zollner said yesterday in his opening remarks, almost ruining my presentation, there is a kind of accountability that is common to all of us, the final judgment. As Jesus puts it in the chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew, and I quote, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit upon his glorious throne, and all the nations will be assembled before him. And he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left." We know how this passage ends. In these circumstances, I think Jesus would also say, "When did you see you abused and we took care of you?" And I'm sure Jesus would answer the same way. "Amen, I say to you, whatever you did for one of these least brothers of mine, you did for me." But it's not this accountability I was asked to talk about. Is it possible to speak about accountability in an organization like the Catholic Church and its institutions? Even if we are all equal to God and we all share the same dignity, as humans and as baptized in the Catholic Church, we have different functions. So, as members, we are all people of God, as solemnly proclaimed by the Second Vatican Council. At the same time, as we all know, there is a hierarchy. So, how does the need and the right to accountability work depending on the function you have? At this point, I would like to make a personal clarification. As I see it, and as I believe, to have a special function in the Church, if one is an ordained minister, a bishop, a cardinal, or even a pope, is to have a special obligation to serve. Having a function in the Church is not primarily to have power on other people, or on a kind of environment, or on an institution. Having a function is a way to serve. That is why the Holy Father is Servus Servorum Dei, servant of the servants of God. The higher you get in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, the stronger you need to serve God, the others, the institution. So, as we could see before, accountability is a kind of right of all the faithful. How does that match the obligation to give an account from the hierarchy members? I would like to answer this question, giving some data maybe that you already know, but to remember, about the legal framework of the Catholic Church regarding accountability. The hierarchical hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church can pose challenges in ensuring accountability, as decision-making authority is concentrated in higher levels of authority. This structure poses some big challenges in order to establish transparent systems that address possible misconduct at all levels. The office of the Sovereign Pontiff. Sometimes the notion of accountability is described also as liability, the power to present a process in the tribunal also. But in the Catholic Church, there is an ancient law that maintains all its validity on the legal framework on the Church. The bishop, and I quote, of the Roman Church, in whom continues the office given by the Lord uniquely to Peter, the first of the apostles, and to be transmitted to his successors, is the head of the College of Bishops, the vicar of Christ, and the pastor of the universal church on earth. By virtue of this office, he possesses supreme, full, immediate, and universal ordinary power in the church, which he is always able to exercise freely. This is the Canon 331 of the Code of Canon Law. One of the consequences is that ancient law I mentioned before. Prima sedes anemine judicatur. The first see is judged by no one. That is why we have the obligation to pray for the Holy Father. And it's not only a legal obligation, it's a lovely obligation. Because no one has the right, from a juridical point of view, to judge the Pope. So, in terms of accountability, we have an office in the Church that answers to no one but to God and to his own conscience. The office of the bishops. Bishops, and I quote the Canon 375 of the Code, who by divine institution succeed to the place of the apostles through the Holy Spirit who has been given to them, are constituted pastors in the Church, so that they are teachers of doctrine, priests of sacred worship, and ministers of governance. End of quote. As ministers of governance, the bishops have quite a few organisms that help them to govern. But all these organisms, usually, have only an advisory nature. In fact, for instance, and I quote, a diocesan bishop in the diocese is entrusted to him as all ordinary, proper, and immediate power which is required for the exercise of his pastoral function, except for cases which the law or a decree of the Supreme Pontiff reserves to the supreme authority or to another ecclesiastical authority. For the purposes of accountability, this is not going well. How can you ask to someone that has all the power of governance to give account of his actions or omissions? And that's a big problem, because you have a concentration of service and of power, and at the same time, you are asked to be transparent, and you are asked to let other people to know what are you doing, how are you doing it, with the objective to see if everything goes well. The crisis as a matter of change. From a juridical point of view, the crisis triggered by the sexual abuse of minors had some consequences that we can see on the efforts to create a legal framework that, in some aspects, presents the concept of accountability, sometimes presented also as responsibility or liability, as an important element of its main core. That effort, shared in different ways by the last popes, has seen an intense effort by Pope Francis to promulgate a renovated legal system. It's not my objective right now to present the history of the legal changes. But I would like to emphasize a few moments of the recent years that I consider particularly important on this passage from a vision of untouchable men and institutions to accountable functions and responsibilities. I won't consider all the efforts of the local churches, such as the documents produced in the United States of America by its bishops and other ecclesiastical authorities and institutions, or in Ireland, Canada, or other countries, but only the documents issued and published by the Holy See. And the first document, of course, is a document we know very well. It's the Motu Proprio Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela, on its three versions, 2001, 2010, and the one which is right now, which is the one in vigor, which is from the 11th of October of 2021, which is the main center of the configuration of the several offices reserved to the dicastery of the doctrine of the faith. But it's part of the concept of accountability, the possibility to appeal from a judicial or extrajudicial decision. That's why it's important the special judging board established in 2018 inside the dicastery for the doctrine of faith for the examination of appeals to the ordinary session of the dicastery for the doctrine of faith. Inside the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, we have several layers that work as different levels of appeal that allow also for the victims to receive justice for the crimes committed by perpetrators. The second document I would like to share is the apostolic letter called As a Loving Mother. And I will read parts of the document, which is not very long, because it's important, because this document is the first of a series that changed a little bit the X of the earth. The duty, and I quote, of care and protection devolves upon the whole church. Yet it is especially through her pastors that it must be exercised. Therefore, diocesan bishops, eparchs, and those who have the responsibility for a particular church must pay vigilant attention to protecting the weakest of those entrusted to her care. And I continue quoting. Canon law already provides for the possibility of removal from ecclesiastical office for grave reasons. This pertains to diocesan bishops and eparchs, as well and those who are by law equal to them. With this letter, Pope Francis says, my intention is to underline that among the aforesaid grave reasons is the negligence of a bishop in the exercise of his office, and in particular in relation to cases of sexual abuse inflicted on minors and vulnerable adults. And the document continues. The diocesan bishop or eparch, or one who even holds a temporary title and is responsible for a particular church or other community or of faithful that it is legal equivalent, can be legitimately removed from this office if he has, through negligence, committed or through omission facilitated acts that have caused grave harm to others, either to physical persons or to the community as a whole. The harm may be physical, moral, spiritual, or through the use of patrimony. The second paragraph of this document says, the diocesan bishop or eparch can only be removed if he is objectively lacking in a very grave manner the diligence that his pastoral office demands of him, even without serious moral fault on his part. The third paragraph. In the case of the abuse of minors and vulnerable adults, it is enough that the lack of diligence be grave. This document, as a loving mother, as you can see, the title that doesn't fit with the rest of the document. I think it's a particular irony from the Holy Father. Is the first document from a legal point of view after the Code of Canon Law that says to bishops and those with responsibility, please do well your job, because there are consequences. Of course, as also Father Zollner said yesterday, you can have the perfect law, but there is another factor that I will call the human factor. I will speak about it later. Next document, a very also known document, Vos Estis Lux Mundi, on its versions of 2019 and 2023, which, as I think we all know, is, in my opinion, the most important and relevant document regarding accountability of bishops and superiors of Catholic institutions, because it creates a legal framework to deal with the omissions and lays the path to treat effectively all the cases not included in Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela. Last but not least, the new book, book number 6 of the Code of Canon Law, which was published last year on the 26th of April, from which I would like to underline some of the new provisions, just to show how accountability is slowly entering in the legal framework of the Catholic Church. For instance, on the Canon 1311, on the second paragraph, and I quote, "The one who is at the head of a church must safeguard and promote the good of the community and each of Christ's faithful through pastoral charity, example of life, advice, and exhortation, and, if necessary, also through the imposition or declaration of penalties, in accordance with the provisions of the law, which are always to be applied with canonical equity and having in mind," and this is the important part, "the restoration of justice, the reform of the offender, and the repair of the scandal." The first thing that this canon says is the restoration of justice, which is a deep transformation of the text. The second canon I would like to read is the Canon 1326. "A judge must inflict a more serious punishment than that prescribed in the law or precept when," and I read the number 2, "a person who is established in some position of dignity or who, in order to commit a crime, has abused the position of authority or an office." The precedent version said, "The judge could inflict." Now the code says a judge must inflict. The same word "must" appears on another canon, 1341. The ordinary, it means the bishop or the ones equiparated to him, must start a judicial or administrative procedure for the imposition or the declaration of penalties. Must start. The precedent version said could start. Another canon, and this is the last one before you get sleepy, is the Canon 1361, which treats about remission. You know, the Catholic Church, God is merciful, we know that, and the Catholic Church also is merciful. But sometimes mercy, it's a big injustice. So the Canon 1361 says, a remission can be granted even to a person who is not present or conditionally. But on the fourth paragraph of this canon, it says, remission must not be granted until, in the prudent judgment of the ordinary, the offender has repaired any harm caused. End of quotation. And now, these are my words. This provision is especially relevant and poses a great complexity when we talk about the abuse of minors and vulnerable adults, because as our experience shows, very often it's not possible to repair the harm caused. Point number 3, the challenges of accountability. The Church's commitment to accountability must extend not only to its religious teachings, but especially to its internal governance and response to misconduct. The Catholic Church has faced significant challenges related to accountability, particularly concerning the handling of sexual abuse scandals involving clergy members. These incidents have underscored the importance of holding individuals and the institution accountable for their actions, both past and present. As I try to underline, the Catholic Church is making some efforts which clearly still need of more effective mechanisms. The hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church can pose challenges in ensuring accountability, as decision-making authority is concentrated in higher levels of the hierarchy of the Church. This structure requires careful consideration to establish transparent systems that address misconduct at all levels. At the same time, the most important element is not the legal framework or perfect provisions or regulations. The most important element is what I would call the human factor. We still don't have a perfect system of accountability in the Catholic Church, but even if we did, the single most important element of the system is the will to be accountable, is the will to be transparent, is the will to be credible. And that will is not yet shared by many in the Catholic Church. It's not a question of love, it's a question of interest. The Church's historical and cultural factors, including a sense of clerical privilege and a tendency to prioritize institutional reputation, have sometimes hindered accountability. Transforming the institutional culture is necessary to promote transparency and prevent misconduct. Encouraging victims to come forward and establishing effective reporting mechanisms are crucial for addressing misconduct. Past failures to properly address and report abuse cases have led to a loss of trust. Ensuring confidentiality, providing support, and prioritizing victim safety are essential components of accountability. I would like to finish, or beginning to finish, with measures for transparency and accountability, some suggestions. And the first suggestion is strengthening policies and procedures. The Catholic Church has implemented new policies to address abuse allegations, including mandatory reporting, background checks, and child protection programs. These policies aim to ensure the safety of vulnerable individuals, to prevent abuse and hold offenders accountable. In several countries, independent review boards and external investigative bodies have been established to impartially examine allegations of abuse and provide recommendations. One of the most recent bodies was created in my country, Portugal, where the bishops promoted an independent commission to study the sexual abuse misconduct from 1950 until the present date. These independent entities help to restore trust and ensure impartiality in the investigation process. But as the Portuguese Church knows, also a single press conference can destroy all the work that has been done. Another point would be collaboration with civil authorities. The Church recognizes the importance of collaborating with civil authorities in many countries, but not in others. This collaboration helps ensure that perpetrators face legal consequences for their actions and provides the Church with the complementary instruments to investigate and prosecute the offenders. Of course, all of these things must be done in the respect of the law of each country. Formation and education. Promoting accountability requires ongoing formation and education for clergy, religious and lay people. This includes training on recognizing and reporting abuse, understanding boundaries, and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability. And usually, and this is my experience treating these kind of cases, usually there is always a problem of money. When there is abuse, when there is a moral misconduct, usually money is always involved. And if it's true that many times we cannot account for, we cannot check the behavior of an individual, money we can count. So many times, one of the good things we should account for is how is this person uses church money. And many times we will find that that's the door that gives us the framework for everything else. You know, I always remember that Al Capone in the 30s and the 40s, he was not convicted by being a mobster, but because he would run away from taxes. Number 5, some consequences on the accountability in an organization like the Catholic Church. The first note, trust and reputation. A culture of accountability, first of all for its own members, fosters trust among not only the faithful, but also among those the Catholic Church wants to reach out in the wider human community. When organizations demonstrate a commitment to taking responsibility for their actions, they inspire confidence amongst its members. Of course, in the case of the Catholic Church, we are a bunch of sinners. We don't deserve a reputation. But as Chesterton said, your reputation is not in your hands, but your character is. The second note I would like to note is ethical conduct. Accountability reinforces ethical behavior within organizations. When members of the hierarchy know they are answerable for their actions, they are more likely to make decisions based on integrity and adhere to ethical standards. At the same time, and I have experienced this in a recent past, being afraid of the consequences of not doing what is mandatory can also be a perfect excuse for a bishop or a superior to act. Learning and improvement. A culture of accountability could encourage a learning mindset. When we take responsibility for our mistakes or shortcomings, we become open to feedback, learning from failures, and continuously improving our skills and processes. Final note, evangelization and healing. Without a real accountability, all the efforts to proclaim the gospel are worthless. The gospel must be preached to real people, not to the wind, or at least not to the fishes, as St. Anthony of Lisbon or of Padua did. Because accountability makes that not only those who are guilty of crimes get what they deserve with mercy, but also with justice, but there is no room to cover-ups and concealments. So there is a direct link between accountability and healing, between responsibility and true justice. Number 6, challenges implementing accountability in the Catholic Church. While accountability is crucial, the Catholic Church faces unprecedented challenges in its implementation. I would like to describe some. First of all, change is difficult. I already mentioned a clerical environment, but it's more profound. There has to be a balance between the hierarchical structure of the church and the mechanisms of accountability that must be created and implemented. And of course, this change of mentality, it's difficult for elder people. It's difficult. I'm in the process of moving home. I'm going back to Portugal. And it's difficult to take the books out and take everything out. And it's a simple thing. So much more difficult is to change our mentality. The second challenge, the Catholic Church is really a global institution with an enormous variety of members. We only have to look to where we are and whom do we have near us. Bishops, priests, religious women and men, laity from so many countries and cultures. It won't be easy to create efficient instruments of accountability worldwide for the Catholic Church. That is why, in my opinion, it's preferable to begin with local solutions, maybe even experimental, and create a new culture locally that can be useful later to all church members. Another challenge is the necessary balance between transparency and secrecy. We know that transparency is vital for accountability. If you don't share information, you cannot be really accountable for nothing, except maybe for your omissions. At the same time, the Catholic Church lives in a special complexity. We must proclaim Jesus Christ even in the roofs. But at the same time, it's necessary to preserve the intimacy of individuals, of the victims, the secrecy of judicial and extrajudicial processes, the seal of confession. So we should have our minds clearly set to be very transparent in the decision-making processes, although respecting the intimacy of individuals. It is not easy. There are no easy answers. Maybe there is no answer, but we have to try. Establishing clear communication channels and providing access to relevant data can help overcome the challenge. And fourth challenge, the Catholic Church should, at every level, set measurable goals to track progress and evaluate its members' performance on accountability. It shouldn't be possible to anyone to hold a position of responsibility in the Church if you don't trust other people to evaluate the way you govern an institution. One of the aspects that can undermine accountability is the lack of clarity regarding roles and responsibilities. I would like to give an example. For instance, the fact that the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith has the juridical competence to judge all the cases of abuse of minors has, of course, positive aspects. But at the same time, may cause that local bishops can have the excuse that this dramatic tragedy is not their responsibility. And in many cases, Rome is far, far away. The Catholic Church should define better role descriptions, define expectations, and communicate them effectively to avoid confusion. Another aspect, which is very disturbing, is that one of the rights of the victims, but also of the accused, is to know who the judge is. In the case of the doctrine of the faith, many times we don't know the judges. We don't know who takes the decisions. And that's a problem, I would say, for the accused, but also for the victims. Because how can you trust a decision if you don't know who is taking that decision? I think that's a big challenge. And for my conclusion, you can wake up now. Accountability for the Catholic Church members is vital to the present and the future of the Catholic Church. I would like to wish you all not only some wonderful days here in Rome, but a fruitful work with all those that need your precious help to regain dignity, health, and happiness. Thank you very much for your patience.
I'm just conscious of everyone sitting up there. If you want to take a couple of minutes just to find seats, if you're a bit more comfortable moving down into the auditorium, those people. As I mentioned earlier, we're just going to move the program around slightly to get Father José on his way. Not that we want you to leave, but he's very busy at the moment. We'll move to question and answers now if we can get some microphones moving around, and just wait, as we did yesterday, till the microphone comes to you to pose a question to Father.
It's not mandatory to have questions. Huh? Don't feel obliged. While they distribute the microphone, I would like to say a final thing. You know, Portugal will have the next World Youth Day in August. I'm actively involved to pray for the Holy Father that he may come. But one of the things they are doing, and I would like to share this, they established a program of formation and of prevention of abuse of minors. And they have implemented it on these past few months. They are making formation for all the volunteers, all the people that are coming also from other countries. And they are having special care from countries that, from also a legal point of view, have mandatory formation for all those that get in touch with minors. And so one of the beautiful things of Lisbon on this encounter is that they are trying very actively, and also it's very expensive, all the things regarding the formation and prevention of abuse, but they are making a real effort. So you can come, it's safe. Huh?
Thank you very much. My name is Frances Orchard from the United Kingdom. You asked us to correct your English. There was a wonderful phrase which you used when you were talking about Jesus proclaiming, should have been from the roofs.
Okay.
But you said in the roofs.
Yeah.
But in fact, it brought up a completely different image for me. It's in the roofs, in the attics, that the secrecy of the conversations take place. You slightly sidestepped issues to do with clericalism. But if you want to know where the clerics are, here in Rome and elsewhere, they're in the attics, they're in the back rooms of the restaurants. Have you got any comment to make?
First of all, thank you very much for the correction. I think I would say two things. The first one is it's easy to change norms and regulations, and it's so difficult to change the head and many times the heart. But what I see, I'm director of a college, so I'm the administrator of a building where 40 priests live, and I've been there for the past 6 years. And I have to say that I'm sensing a change in the way they live and in the way they think. Because, of course, we have everything, you know, it's a big Noah ark we have. But at the same time, I see people with a great interest in adapt themselves to the people that live today and to preach not only with words, but in first place with their lives. That this would be my comment. When I see my college, and I speak of my college with great pride, we are all sinners and with our miseries, but at the same time I see great hope in the present, in the future of the church, because I see some priests very interested in not to impose their power on others, but to preach the gospel. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Elena from Spain,
Nice to
work in Betania. Sorry for my humble English. And
You can
So
ask in Spanish
I
if you want.
hope you can
I will
understand
answer
me.
in English.
Thank you very much for your words and your speech. And we would like to, I would like to ask you about, because this accountability concept is close to what in the society is already implemented. No? So the church is coming closer to what the society has. But there is a question of reparation, and I'm missing this question, because the church, in this concept of accountability, should repair also. I suppose you already has this in your church. In Spain, we are repairing. Our activity is to look for repairing for the victims, and this repairing may be moral, material, and financial also. And all this is not very commonly commented.
Yeah.
And there is, I think, there is some fear that the church is going to be collapsed. Maybe in the US was collapsed.
Yeah.
In our culture, this won't happen. But there is no mention, not too much mention about this. And I would like to listen to you and how in your country this is being solved, or what are the proposals that maybe you personally may have in this regard.
Thank you for the question. I didn't speak about reparations because it's a difficult theme. I would say three things. The first is, for God, the only thing that matters is the number one. Because for God, He sees every person as unique, and He treats us as sons and daughters. For those who are parents, you may have 10 sons and daughters, but each one is unique. So for God, the same. And I think the Catholic Church, in part, one of the difficulties to speak about reparation is that you can give some general goals or objectives or guidelines for reparation, but each case is unique. Each victim is unique. And that's a big problem, because there are victims that the financial support is absolutely necessary. There are other victims that get offended if you offer them money. So I would say, for first thing, we have to find a way to repair, acknowledging and respecting the dignity of each victim. And of course, that reparation has to involve all the dimensions also of the Catholic Church. The spiritual one, the prayer, the help on the psychological and psychiatric part, the health issues, also the financial. But I would say that one of the things that maybe, for my experience, maybe for a victim, it's very difficult to speak, to open herself and to recall all the traumatic experience. So I would say it's very difficult sometimes to get a victim in front of a panel of three persons that will evaluate what reparation that person should give. So first thing is, each victim is unique, and we have to be very careful to establish which kind of reparation for each person. The second is the church has to repair. And that's my opinion, my personal opinion. And in Portugal, this was one of the problems in the aftermath of the independent commission. We weren't able, I say we because I was there in the press conference of the 3rd of March, in which the bishops presented what they were doing after the report. And we weren't able to express with clarity what we would do. And this caused a big suffering for many people. And what I think is reparation is needed, maybe not for that person, because maybe that person doesn't want. In Portugal, there was no one in the 500 people that presented their case to the independent commission, there was no one asking for economical reparation. Not one. They wanted to counter stories. They wanted to the abuser to ask forgiveness. They want to the church to acknowledge that there was an abuse. And the other thing is, it's what I am about to say is very strong. It's not an accusation, but it makes part of this necessity of accountability or the lack of it. The same persons that 5 years ago said there are no abuse cases in Portugal were the same that began the commission, independent commission, and are the same that still are working in the bishops. It's not a critique. It's that in some years, in a few years, some things changed. So about the repair, my opinion is we have to repair, and maybe that reparation may come to an institution that will help out other victims, or may help. And the third thing is, it's true, maybe we are going to be bankrupt. Pope Francis said that the best bank account is the empty bank account. In part, of course, we need the material resources to get through. But at the same time, if we add nothing, we still add everything. We still add Jesus Christ. We still add the faith, the prayer, and all the spiritual resources. And we must ask ourselves, those 12 in the beginning, what did they have? So it's possible. Don't be afraid.
Can you just wait till the microphone?
Said that victims, they don't ask for money. This is true. This is not really.
Yeah, of course.
It's not a reality. They don't. It's very difficult. One of the consequences of the trauma is the difficulty to put words to what happened, and also to put words to what they may have right.
Yeah.
So this should not be said in the church, because it is very hard for the victims to listen to that.
What I want to express
not
is...
in your case.
What I want to express is that all the victims that would put forward their denounce of case of abuse, they should compile a formulary. And that it was an online form. And that question was there, yes or no. So they didn't have to use words to express what they would like to do. It was the way the commission did it. I don't say it's a good thing, but it was there. And this thing struck me, because it was easy to say yes. It wasn't hard to say yes. And they all said no. Maybe that question will come up later. And that's why one of the good things the Catholic bishops did was to create a second commission that yesterday made public that they created a group of 60 psychiatrists and psychologists to accompany all the victims that want to be accompanied in all the territory of Portugal. And so, and this is going to be paid by the Conference of Bishops. Let's hope.
Julie, can you just introduce yourself ahead of your question? Your accent will give it away where you're from.
Thanks, Simon. Hello, I'm Julie Edwards, the CEO of Jesuit Social Services in Australia. We're a social change organisation working with people exiting custody who have mental health problems, etc. And many of those have suffered abuse. I'm not saying from within the church at all, but in families and in other institutions. Thanks for your presentation, and in part your answer to the previous question dealt with some of this. But one of my big concerns, in Australia, people are asking for reparation, which I think is good. And for example, the very large insurance company, Catholic Church Insurance, as Simon would know, is on the brink of collapse and won't take any more claims because they have been cleaned out. But one of the things I hear regularly is we don't have money anymore from within the church. We're seeing their withdrawal of money to support Catholic social service agencies from the bishops, etc., and also religious orders. Oh, we have to keep this money for redress. Many of these institutions have significant portfolios of properties and shares, etc., and I think the double harm that is now being done is in the name of redress, and I think absolutely they should pay reparation. But we maybe need to be cleaned out, as you've said, and so I think it is really a double sin now, or we can't deal with the poor anymore because of our past sins. So I may not be the focus for this conference, but I actually think it is a really big issue that we need to look at. Love your response to that. Thank you.
I think the biggest treasure of the church is people. The biggest treasure of the church are the persons. First of all, the three persons of the Holy Trinity, but also each person that we have, not only in the Catholic Church, but in this human fraternity where we are evolving. And of course, there is patrimony that we cannot sell because we see it here in Rome. Where are the places where you can enter for free to see the beauty? Churches. So there is a type of patrimony that we cannot sell. We cannot simply be vanished because we are creating another poverty if we do that. But maybe there is some kind of patrimony that we could use to... there is a project, of course it's a very small thing, and it would never reach the values that we are talking when... but there is a small place in Spain, I think it's in Spain, where they are using the patrimony for local housing. And with the revenues, they are channeling all the revenues to support victims. It's a very, very, very small thing. What I'm trying to say is, maybe we can be, in some cases, we can be ingenious, we can be originals, we can use also the opportunities we have in the society to help victims. But I would say, maybe some patrimony we could sell it, other we have to. One of the things that people that come to Rome say a lot is, why is the church so rich with the Vatican Museum or St. Peter? Why don't we sell it? Because that would create another poverty. If we sell everything in St. Peter or in the Vatican museums, how can we know what beauty is? Right? One of the things I was to say, but then I was afraid, is that when the cardinals elect the Pope, What do they see in the Sistine Chapel? The Last Judgment of Michelangelo. So there is a kind of accountability for those who are gathered in the Sistine Chapel when they elect the Pope, which is also a kind of accountability. Thank you very much for.
I've just got two final questions. Just Father Marek.
You are speaking about transparency. Oh, Marek from Czech Republic. Sorry. When we are speaking about accountability and transparency, to my mind come the process how we choose the new bishops. There is no transparency at all. I would say there is no accountability even. And so when we are thinking about the accountability of the bishops, and right in the beginning of his duty, of his service, is not at all something like that. I'm thinking how we can hope for the accountability in the future. So maybe you can comment something about it. And the second thing is, if I'm thinking accountability of the bishops to the people of his diocese, because for me it's still, at least in our countries, it's a medieval structure. There is a man of power and the rest of the people. So those changes which you mentioned are, I hope, good, but it's still that small, I think. Thank you.
About the bishops, of course the process cannot be public, because for making a bishop, the apostolic nuncio in a country has to, in the beginning, ask for at least 40 people for informations about one person. If the list of persons that is going to send to Rome are 3, it means he has at least to consult 120 people. That's the first layer. Then the nuncios, and usually with this number 2, they make a synthesis of what they have gathered, and they make an analysis, and that's the second layer. Then they ship everything to the dicastery of the bishops. And the secretary receives and makes the official of that country in the dicastery, inside the dicastery, to study all things received by the nuncio. Sometimes, especially when this happens with new nuncios, the dicastery has to ask for more information. So on the third layer, you have already some kind of revision of the work. And then it goes to the secretary again. And then it goes to the plenary of the dicastery. It's the 4th layer. And then goes to the prefect, who takes to the Pope. So it's a 5-layer work. Of course, it's not public, because if you have to present 3 names for one diocese, you will have one bishop and the other 2 won't be bishops. And maybe this will raise questions saying, why weren't they chosen? What's happening there? But this is how it works. Also, what I want to see is there is a different kind of accountability on some processes on the church. But they lack absolutely of accountability. No, the thing is, it's a different kind. Of course, we have 2,000 years, or we have 15,000 years choosing bishops. We had some bishops from acclamation in the early years of the church. But this is not a perfect method, but it's, I think, from what I see, or what I know, it's a method that has proven to be the best possible. Let me finish. Let me finish. About the second thing, I think small changes in the church sometimes have erupted in big changes. And I think that's what I think, that big changes will come mainly for financial reasons. So maybe in countries where things are a little bit harder to change about accountability, in one moment, in a few, I saw it in my country, in Portugal, where in the last 2 years, many things have changed. The most important thing is many people with responsibilities in the church finally opened their eyes and recognized that they were abused persons. And that is a big, big change.
Again, I'm just religious, so
Okay.
we elect our abbot
Okay.
very easily, and and he knows how many people support him, so his mandate is quite clear.
Of course.
And it's working for 1,000 years already, almost, no, 900 years. So there are different ways how we can do it,
Yes.
and just,
Yes. What I think is choosing bishops is not an easy task, and the precedent perfect from the dicastery told that at least 30% of the candidates would say no. And one of the things he said was, I think one of the motives is priests are very afraid to take care of abuse cases, to treat abuse cases. So what I would say is we have to pray more for priests and for the bishops and for the abbots. Yeah.
Good morning, Father. My name is Jeno. I'm from the Philippines.
Yay.
My question is related to the matter of reparation and the church depleting in its funds in many parts of the world, and your comment that we have to be disingenuous about it. It's also related to the last part of your presentation, where one of the measures we should take in order to promote accountability is to collaborate with civil authorities. My question is based on what happened to the Archdiocese of Boston. In 2002, the Archdiocese seriously contemplated to declare bankruptcy. It was on the verge of insolvency. The irony there was, what triggered it was because of the misdeeds of Father John Joghan. But the Archdiocese was on the brink of insolvency, but Father Joghan was not. And in fact, he had properties. He had a summer house where he brought kids to molest them there. And in order to protect himself from judgment, he sold the summer house for only $1 to his sister. And my question is, why is it that there is an assumption in our church that the priests who are perpetrators, they must be exempt from civil liability? Why is it that it is not part of our option in collaborating with civil authorities that we sue them and on behalf of the church get money from them in order to compensate our coffers? Because the money, for example, in Boston, they paid $10 million to protect him from going to jail. And for many people who donate to the church, that is very offensive because they do not donate to protect perpetrators from going to jail. They do not donate in order to silence cases or to obstruct justice. But it's being used that way, and then we have priests who are, most of the time, freed from civil liability. And when we talk about disingenuous, is it part of our option when we collaborate with civil authorities to maybe sometimes sue the priests for compensation? Because it's their personal liability, and it's only out of mercy and out of compassion that we help them, but we shouldn't use the money to protect them from imprisonment, because that will, in a way, erode trust in the church, because church funds are shared funds.
Of course. I would like to say three things. The first one is, of course, I won't comment on the specific case. I don't have the data. But, of course, we should use all the means that the civil law gives us to solve these cases. But this is the third thing I would like to say, there is a new provision on the canon law that helps the bishop to impose punishment to the priest, giving him the obligation to use his phone. So maybe sometimes we can use the civil law, but now from last year, we can use also the canon law. The bishop can use the canon law, and the tribunal can use the canon law to make mandatory to the... And we go from the principle that a priest is a man of faith. So if the bishop says to him, you are not only suspended, but you cannot receive the sacraments until you don't repair with your properties, we hope that the priest, at least as a man of faith, can revise his life. I would like to say just a final thing. I would like to ask forgiveness for the change of the program, but also for my continued attempt to kill the English language. So for the English natives, sorry for my...
On that note, I think the phrase that resonated with me most, Father, is if we have nothing, we still have everything. And I think that's a fantastic comment and very poignant in what we're talking about over these days. Obrigado, Father José. Thank you very much, and please, thank you.